All right. As we get started, there are a couple of handouts that I hope you may have gotten to throughout, but we have attendance sheets where you can write down whether or not you have attended. Well, I guess not if you attended, but these attendance sheets will be passed around. We have 3 for the different sections, so feel free to take a moment and write your name down on that sheet of paper. Let us know that you're here. And then we also have, you each should have received this policy revisions packet. Each person will need this if you are child protection approved, because it is amendments or revisions to what has happened in our policy manual. We'll get to that here in just a second. Jesse will bring them in. He's having to print off a few more. We were running low on them. But these will come around to you in just a second. But each person will need this because you will be responsible for these revisions and amendments to the policy. There's also out there, if you are not already approved, you can apply to work with minors. And if you need one of those applications, you can go ahead and slip your hand up because we can get one of those to you as well. And that person will also need the full child protection policy. This is just the amendments, and they're highlighted in there. You can see where they're at and what ways that it can be helpful to you, but the full policy we can bring around to you as well. You will need that in order to be approved. And then last but certainly not least, we have the transportation and permission form for all parents that will be in your boxes today, so you can check your mailboxes. But also, if you don't have a mailbox out there or don't know that you have a mailbox, you can also check out there in the foyer, and we can get you one as well. All children need that in order to participate in our programs and ministries here at the church, any activities we have. So please fill that out. All right, I want to take a moment and just talk about the purpose for the training. Maybe it's pretty self-explanatory and we all understand, but I like to refocus on this part as we start our time here together. First off, it's part of our policy for continuing ministry to minors. So in order to continue your ministry to minors, we do have to go through some sort of training each year. This year, we're going to be walking through our policy manual in whole and just talking through it, and we'll have questions at the end for anything that pops up. And it's important because we do have a couple of updates as well. It's also to remind us of things that we may be forgetting. I know attendance is one thing that oftentimes flies under the radar, whether it's for myself or for other people. I know attendance is something we tend to forget, but to remind us of things like taking attendance that can be helpful. Then also to inform us on updates to the child protection policy, whether it's an amendment or a revision or an addition in some way, shape, or form. This is a way for you to be up to date on what is going on in our child protection policy. Then it's also to remind us of the serious nature of protecting our children. And I think we all see this importance, and we see the importance that God puts on the discipling of children and even evangelism of children, the serious nature for it. But it's also important for us to protect them as well as we are trying to do these things. So this is our reason for doing this. As I said, I will ask that you save any questions that you have until the end. I was trying to go through this yesterday, and my parents are here, and I was trying to explain all of this to them so I'd know about how much time it would take me, and it took me an hour and a half, it felt like, to get through everything. So I'm going to ask you to save all your questions until the end, so that way they're not as familiar with how we do things here, but we'll ask that you save your questions until the end. So let's get into our policy here. Here's the introduction. Our child youth ministries are not immune from possible contact with abused children or their abusers. It seems prudent or wise that we specify procedures which would best accomplish the purpose of our child protection policy. So this is why we have our policy, because we want to be wise or prudent, as it says there. A verse that always pops in my mind as I'm thinking about child protection things is Proverbs 22:3. And I know I referenced last year, I reference it in every child protection committee meeting. But a prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. We're simply just being wise. Not that we're just being cynical, thinking something bad is going to happen, but we want to protect from anything that could easily happen that could be evil. And just be wise or prudent as we foresee evil that could happen and protect ourselves or hide ourselves, rather than just being simple-minded and passing on and punished. Let's continue. What's our purpose here? Well, our purpose of this policy is to protect the minors from harm. Also to protect the workers from false accusations. To protect the testimony of the Baptist Church of Hadley, and to comply with our insurance company and our state laws. So here, obviously, we all have a special interest, and some of us more vested interest in protecting the minors here that we minister to. But also, each person would also have a vested interest in protecting from false accusations as well. And I think we all, as well, would have a vested interest in the testimony of the Baptist Church of Hadley, wanting to continue our ministry here. And ultimately, whether you care about it or not, we do want to comply with our insurance company and our state laws in order to best serve our community. Let's get to descriptions of abuse. First off is physical abuse. Physical abuse occurs when a minor is intentionally harmed bodily, resulting in scrapes, bruises, welts, burns, broken bones, etc. It's easy to notice, and it's typically in areas that you can see are bruises, welts, different things like that. And when you notice it, we're going to go through in just a little bit how we handle physical abuse when it arises. There's also neglect. This may be easy to recognize as well, but also could be hard in some cases. Neglect is failing to provide adequately for the minor's physical, emotional, and safety needs. While it may not seem as big of a deal because it doesn't seem like they're causing intentional harm, it is intentional harm because they are neglecting what is important for this minor to continue to grow. I had this note here. I'll go over the note in just a second because we want to get to the next part. Emotional abuse is non-physical in nature, but still very painful. Emotional deprivation and devaluing a minor with critical words or threats are examples of emotional abuse. Still take this very seriously, because oftentimes how you treat someone is often how they view themselves. They view their life as worthless. And you can imagine how they might treat their life at that point. Next thing is sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is inappropriate sexual touch or forced viewing of sexually explicit material or acts. We do have this note up here, and it's important for us to note this. It is to be understood that this list is not exhaustive, only representative. This is not an exhaustive list of ways that you could abuse children, but it is to be representative of some ways that someone could abuse children. So continuing on, let's develop a policy a little bit to prevent this abuse from arising, specifically in our ministries here at the church, or even discovering how we can best report it. First off, we're going to screen all workers by means of questionnaire and by checking references. Then we'll have policies to reduce or exclude high-risk behaviors. And then there will be training and supervision to assure that these policies are followed. A proper procedure for reporting and responding to an allegation of abuse. Planning a low-risk teaching environment. And then keeping adequate attendance records of minors and adults at all church activities, both at and away from the church property. So this is what it looks like, but let's expand it a little bit to see how exactly this policy is enacted in our day-to-day lives. And as we get into this, as we get into our expanded policy, you'll notice different parts that are bolded up there on the screen. And those will represent the highlighted portion here in your revisions that show us what exactly it is, what exactly has been revised or changed about our policy. All of these revisions and things are not things that we're necessarily doing wrong that we've needed to fix, but they're best practice, maybe things that we're already doing and would just be a better way to do it. And some things are just added for best practice here at the church. I guess I already said that, but oh well. Let's get into it. Policies for staff screening, staff selection and screening. Candidates for positions with duties requiring or permitting time with minors shall complete an application and be required to submit to subsequent interview as part of a background check. The application shall include name, address, telephone number, date of birth, driver's license number, experience working in children or youth ministries, occupational history, criminal convictions, and references. So, if you have not already, and you're filling out this application right now as you're sitting in this room, this is what you'll be going through. And you may be wondering, all right, what happens to this information that I provide? Well, we'll get to that here in just a second. But applications for youth ministries shall be accepted from those who are regularly attending members and are of good standing in the church. Next thing is, for non-members, anyone who is a non-member looking to work with, for non-members, an application for youth ministries shall be accepted from those who have given clear evidence of their conversion and who have attended regularly for at least 6 months. Non-members will also be required to fill out the non-member annual renewal ministry to minors application and questionnaire. Tried to come up with an acronym for that, but it didn't work out so well. The application will be resubmitted each June and reviewed annually by the deacon board. I do have that here with me today, and because this is new, I didn't set it out there. But this is a new part that we're introducing this year. So if you are a non-member working with minors, this is something you will have to fill out annually, and the deacon board will review it and then approve you to work with minors again for the next coming year. Also, for anyone under age 18 will need parent or guardian consent and signature for completion of the application and criminal background check. Permission will also be required for participation as a children's worker. So anyone under the age of 18 can still work and minister to minors, but it will take parental permission. Sorry, my family got on me yesterday because I say parental instead of parental. Anyway. You may wonder, what happens to these things that I put in my application and in that questionnaire? Well, the information in these forms is confidential, and under normal circumstances, it will be reviewed by the pastoral staff and deacons appointed to the Child Protection Committee. However, if there is an actual incident or accusation of child abuse, it may become necessary for this information to be reviewed by others, including, but not limited to, the church attorney and the church insurance company. No one who has ever been convicted of either sexual or physical abuse of minors may serve in any church-sponsored activity or program for minors, except by approval of the Child Protection Committee. And this is where I do want to say, there is not a circumstance where we can think of where this would actually come into play, where we would actually approve somebody who has been in this position, but we don't want to trap ourselves in our own policy for whatever reason. Continuing on. Policies to reduce or exclude high-risk behavior. We have adult/team supervision. At least 2 qualified workers should be present supervising any children's or youth ministry activity or program. One of these workers will be an adult over 18. So there are situations where we have teenagers who are helping out, but at least one of those workers must be over the age of 18. Who is responsible for this supervision. Then also, supervision should be maintained after the event until the last minor is picked up. So that means there should be 2 qualified workers there until the end of the event, until that last minor is picked up. And then the 2 qualified workers can leave. You may also note that where 2 or more members of the same family work together in a church activity, a non-related worker shall also be present. This means that the 2 qualified workers cannot be married, siblings, related in any way, shape, or form. I guess we don't want to trace it back too far. But there is, non-related workers are required to keep this supervision. The reason is a husband cannot be compelled to testify against his wife, and a wife cannot be compelled to testify against her husband in the case of court. So we want to keep away from any sticky issues there. There shall be at least 2 qualified workers in the nursery at all times. One of these workers will be an adult over 18, and 1 worker must be non-related. To define this non-related term, a qualified adult assigned to view classrooms and be available for assistance shall be considered the non-related supervising adult. For instance, an usher, a hall monitor, etc. Then we added this in just because it probably needs to be stated, but security cameras do not count as additional child supervision. You may think, well, I'm just going to have this youth event here, and we have this thing happening, and we have enough security cameras to cover the entire church. We should be fine. No, these are meant for accountability, not for supervision. It's meant to pick up on something after it happens, not to be there in the case of supervising children. I hope that makes sense. Also, scheduling of ministry activities and programs. All activities and programs other than regularly scheduled programs must be approved by the appropriate department coordinator, and the children's ministry planning form shall be completed and kept on file. So you can't just hold any random activity you want to here during the week. You must get it approved by the department coordinator and also fill out that children's ministry planning form. You may wonder, all right, who are the department coordinators? So this will pop up here, but it'll also pop up later. A pastor would be considered Pastor Luke Hollis. Deacon board chairman is Bob White. All right, if you want to come to any of the pastors, you can come to me as well. Don't want to put it all on Pastor Luke in that situation. But Sunday school would be Evan Hahn. Nursery would be Renee Vincent. Children's church would be myself. Kids for Truth is Zach and Katie Edwards. And then core is myself as well. That would be our teen ministry, our youth group. So let's continue on with scheduling of ministry activities and programs. Written attendance of all minors and adults for each activity must be turned in and kept on file. So we want to take attendance to see who is here, and that's in case something happens so we can come back and see, all right, yes, both, they were here, we know it, and it's kept on file. A little bit of accountability. All activities and programs other than regularly scheduled programs must be posted on the church calendar by the church secretary. What about parental permission? There are various circumstances in which we need parental permission. So written consent from each child's parent or legal guardian on the approved form shall be required for all activities and programs of church property. That was the thing that came around to all parents today, that you can sign it and give us all your information so we can contact you in case something goes wrong. But there's also other circumstances. In student ministry, in situations regarding church ministries, activities, or programs, where an adult has a legitimate reason to be alone with one of the students off church property, church staff or volunteer workers should obtain written consent from the student's guardian or parent before going out with that student alone or spending time with the student in an unsupervised setting. Workers are to notify their department coordinator in advance of such meetings. This does not apply to personal counseling. So what this looks like is, if, just to give a special example, I guess, in practical life, if Terry says, hey, I want to take a teenager out for dinner or something, Terry gets permission from the parents. He then turns that in to his department coordinator, which would be me in that situation. That's a practical example, and you can turn it in to the department coordinators or a pastor, deacon board chairman, but preferably your department coordinator would be most helpful, and we'll pass it around. And what this looks like is this can be a text message, an email, a handwritten note, whatever it is. We just need it in writing because that is what will hold up in court if so be it. Also, this is just best practice, but this is a change we have. When leaving an event, written permission is required for any minor leaving church with a different person than who they arrived with. For instance, they're dropped off by their parents, but riding home with another teenager or a sibling. This includes teens riding with other teens to be dropped off or going to their house. Written permission can be turned in to the director of that ministry. So what this means, and because this is new, just to explain it a little bit, this oftentimes affects teenagers the most in this situation, but when a teen comes, maybe their parents drop them off and then they need to ride back with another teenager. The parents just have to send me a little text or the department coordinator a little text saying it, and then we know, and you can go on throughout your day. This is just so parents are aware, and we're aware that parents are aware of where their children are at. Also, if a teenager is driving him or herself to an activity happening away from church property, written permission is required for the driver as well as anyone that might be riding with them. So for instance, if a teenager has siblings and they're taking their siblings with them to an activity happening off church property and they're driving themselves because they need to go home from there or whatever, we just need written permission to know that parents are okay with this happening. This is because it is outside of our permission slip that we have signed. Because if they're riding with us, we don't need that same permission, but if they're driving themselves, we do need that permission. Overnight activities. We do give special attention to overnight activities, whether it's planning or different rules and expectations. I'll just read this up here. Special attention will be given to the planning of overnight activities to assure that the safety of all participants. Rules and expectations for behavior and standards shall be clearly communicated to all participants prior to the beginning of the activity. We have a few more standards on this. Only qualified workers shall be able to participate in the overnight activities, even if it is a parent. This is not to say that parents who are approved workers cannot participate, but this is to say that if a parent is not an approved worker, they cannot participate in the overnight activity. An overnight activity involving male and female minors, at least one male and one female, unrelated adult qualified worker shall be present. Adult qualified workers are those over the age of 18. We did add that word unrelated in there just to keep it consistent with our policy and what we're already doing. So there's not much of a change there, but we just wanted to make it consistent with what we're already doing. Next is bathroom assistance. There is a little bit of changes here that I want to point you towards, but there's two different categories in which we consider bathroom assistance. The first is early childhood up to 4 years of age. There's a change here. Only women over the age of 18 should assist children in the bathroom. So only women over the age of 18. This is different than how we do it now. We do consider teenagers to be able to help, but we do want to set it so that way only women over the age of 18 should assist children in the bathroom. Next, how should you handle this if you are a woman over the age of 18? Well, you stand outside the bathroom and prop the doors open. If the child asks for help, go inside to help and leave the door open. If the child is having difficulties with clothing, whether it's buttons, snaps, zippers, anything, assist in the doorway and not close the door to the bathroom and walk inside. That's not what we're doing. Instead, leave the door open and assist in the doorway rather than creating an environment where it's just you and the child helping. Next is childhood, kindergarten to 6th grade. Adult supervision should remain in the hallways. So this is different than childhood up to 4 years old. But there's also a change here in how we just worded this just to make it consistent in points B and C. If there's an emergency, get another adult to assist and prop the door open and enter. And if there is behavioral discipline problems, get another adult and prop the door open. Then you can handle the discipline problem. So, hope this is pretty self-explanatory, but in the event that a kid is inside messing around in the bathroom doing whatever, you prop the door open after getting another adult. And typically, there's an usher only feet away that can help you with whatever it is that they're doing. And then there's also an emergency situation. You want to get another adult first, so you're not just entering by yourself to create an environment that is unsafe. Also, substitutes must be cleared by the approved department coordinator. So remember that list of department coordinators? Substitutes must be cleared by the approved department coordinator and must be approved as a qualified worker. So there's two different things that need to happen here if you are going to need a substitute for whatever it is that you're doing. Just make sure you get it approved by the department coordinator, whether it is myself, Evan Hahn, Zach and Katie, all across the board. Get it approved, Renee Vincent as well. Make sure you get it approved by her. And then they also just need to be an approved qualified worker. Pretty self-explanatory, but let's go through the channels of getting it approved by the department coordinator. All right, policy for training and supervision, a little bit of what we're doing here today. All nursery and children's and youth workers will be required to participate in a training process as part of the Child Protection Program, which is what we're doing here today. But failure to complete the annual training within 30 days of the initial training will result in suspension of ministry privileges. So from today, that means July 7th, is the final day that you have to continue your ministry privileges. Now, after those 30 days, you just won't be able to minister in this capacity until you complete that training. But to give a little bit of leeway and not saying next week our Sunday school teachers can't teach until they have the child protection training done, we're going to give 30 days of leeway so that way you can complete your training for that. Of course, this doesn't apply to anybody in here because you're all doing this right now, but it is helpful to have this in the policy. Topics addressed in the training will include the definition of child abuse, what behaviors constitute abuse, the damaging effects it has upon the victim, reasons for the Child Protection Program, policies and procedures for reporting inappropriate conduct. There will be a required annual review of the policy for all workers and leaders, which is what we're doing here today. The church will maintain written record of participation. This is a way that you can review what we're going through. Any inappropriate conduct or relationship between an adult worker and a minor should be confronted immediately and investigated. Prompt warning should be issued when appropriate, and the training and the situation monitored closely. The adult worker services should be terminated immediately for continued violation of such warnings or for a single violation of such gravity. So once again, if someone is being inappropriate in any way, shape, or form, it's going to be confronted. We need to confront it right away. And then, if there's continued violation, you lose ministry privileges. Or one single violation of such gravity should also end ministry privileges. Adults who work with minors should understand that abuse of minors can lead to a felony conviction. The church insurance policy may not provide them with legal defense of a misconduct charge or pay any portion of a jury verdict assessed against them due to such conduct. A form will be given to each worker, which they must sign, indicating they have been informed of the above information. Let's get to policies for the reporting process. All allegations shall be taken seriously and be promptly investigated. Our goal is not to take any sort of allegations and just toss it aside. We actually want to take this very seriously. How we handle it, especially within the first 24 hours, can be the weight of how it is even investigated. So we want to take it very seriously and promptly investigate it. All allegations of abuse shall be reported to the department coordinator or pastor or deacon board chairman. The pastors or board chairman shall be responsible for contacting the church lawyer and insurance company as deemed necessary. Proper authorities will be contacted at this time if deemed necessary. Physical evidence of abuse shall be reported to one of the pastors or the board chairman, who shall communicate the evidence to the church lawyer, insurance company, and authorities if deemed necessary. And a designee of the Child Protection Committee shall notify the parents within 24 hours. Once again, we want to handle this in the most God-glorifying and the way that we properly should under our government. The deacons shall take steps to ensure that thorough investigation proceeds immediately and that the alleged victim's privacy be protected and emotionally supported. All efforts in handling an alleged incident shall be documented in writing, including but not limited to dates and times of meetings, phone calls, and the names of all those involved. Once again, we want to be very much above board in this reporting process. Anyone in ministries with minors under the supervision of this church who have been accused of or who is under investigation for alleged inappropriate conduct toward or with minors shall be removed from sanctioned contact with minors of the church until the deacons determine whether the removal should be permanent. If the accused person is a paid employee of the church, arrangements will be made to maintain his or her income until the allegations are cleared or substantiated. Once again, we don't want to leave someone in an environment where they are uncomfortable and things could have already been out of hand, and we want to be able to remove somebody from a bad situation. In the event of media or community attention, the deacon board shall appoint a spokesperson for the church to respond to any media or community attention. In the event of a media or community attention, a prepared public statement shall be used to answer the press and to convey news to the congregation, being careful to safeguard the privacy and confidentiality of everyone involved. Once again, just want to be very above board in how we handle our reporting process. What about planning a low-risk teaching environment? I have a few things here. Windows shall be in all classroom doors. Obviously, you can walk throughout and you can see windows in all the classroom doors. This is specifically so ushers can pop in and can see what is going on, and they can know, all right, is this a safe environment right now? Also, safety plug devices shall be installed in all classrooms with children, toddler age, and younger. And then fire safety precautions, which we will go over here in a while after we're finished with this, shall be taken. Fire safety precautions shall be taken. Whether that's a fire extinguisher, fire escape plan posted, exits clearly marked, which you can see throughout our building. And then there's also a policy for attendance records. Adequate attendance records shall be kept of minors and adults at all church activities, both at and away from the church. Let me tell you why this is so important. With the Grand Blake shooting that happened not too long ago, and it's still probably very fresh in our minds, they were not taking attendance, and then first responders were going back in to check for children that weren't even there. And so in order to best protect some of the people, our minors, and even the first responders, I think one of the best ways we can keep track of people is just taking attendance, and then in the event of an emergency situation, we take that attendance record with us and make sure all of the children are still there. So we're not sending people into dangerous situations. That's just one reason why we also, it's in case of an event that a situation arises, we can see, the first thing we can see, all right, these two people were here. And somebody could lie and say, no, I wasn't there, when they were clearly here on our attendance records. It's a great way that we can keep people accountable and easily solve situations. Now this whole thing, this point G, which you have in your pamphlet there, is all new. And part of the reason for this, and part of the reason in my thinking in coming up with this policy and getting it approved, is because as you minister here at the church, odds are you will be building relationships with children and with teenagers that may cause for some interaction either away from church, whether it's not a church-sanctioned activity or different things. And we want to make sure that even though you are ministering here at church, that also if you have a chance to minister away from church, that you still have some sort of accountability here and know how to interact when you're away from just the classroom setting here at church and the various areas that you serve in. So let's get into it. A lot of it is just practical, just a simple way that we can be above board, be above the line as we interact with our minors. Workers' interaction with children off church property have an influence on the ministry of the church with that child. I think specifically of a bus kid who may only know you from church and you run into them at the store. Their parents may have no clue who you are, and they say, hey, that's my teacher, and they know that's not their teacher is at school. Who is this? And your interaction or influence on that child could have an effect on how that parent then views the ministry of the church. Workers who interact with children outside of the church's program should maintain the same deportment or behavior as they would in the church. You are still representing us, meaning you run into a kid at the store, you should still interact with them in the same way that you would here at church. I hope that's still seen as above board, that you want to be above board in those situations. So as we have these policies for interaction away from church property, church services, activities, functions, and properties, we should know that approved workers that are caring for church children, we are bringing in this change. So if you find yourself in a situation in which you are charged with the well-being of a child who you are unrelated to, a one-time written acknowledgement shall be turned in to one of the pastors or the deacon board chairman. Here's our goal with this, is if you find yourself babysitting on a random weekend, a random weekday, the goal is for you to just turn in and say, yep, I am babysitting these children right here. And here's the goal. We do not want to control who it is that you're babysitting. That's not it at all. It's simple accountability. If an incident arises or an allegation arises, we would love to be able to say, hey, here is the unfiltered access that this person has to children. Once again, we don't want to control who you are ministering to, but it's an understanding that even as you are ministering here at the church, that your interaction away from church can have an influence on how we minister here at church. And here's the simple way of putting it. If I show up to your house on a random weekday, you're probably not going to think of me as Joe Schmo from the street. You're going to think of Pastor Micah from the church. It's a simple way of putting it. Let's keep going. Incidental or planned meetings at the store or school events, sporting events, or other public venues, specifically where the parents are still present. This is a time where you see the parents and you know they're there. The parents are still in charge. How do we interact? Well, be mindful of these interactions that you have with children you know from church, that you may see in public spaces. public places. Children and parents may only know you from the ministries at the Baptist Church of Hadley, and you are representing the church and God in these moments. Also, parents have full right to ask you to leave. If a parent asks you to leave, then depart. Get out of there. They have full right to ask you to do so. Just one way that we can be above board as well. Now, what about online and electronic? You may say, Pastor Mike, it's none of your business what I do with kids online. Well, that's probably a problem right off the bat that you would say that. But we do find that people are building relationships in person, but then much of the grooming process happens online and through electronic means. So, what we know is all interaction online or by technology should glorify God. And therefore, any inappropriate communication using technology, whether it's phones, computers, tablets, gaming consoles, etc., between anyone involved in ministries with minors and a minor will not be tolerated. Anyone suspected of such communication shall be removed from their place of service until a full investigation can be completed. And once the investigation is concluded, the worker will be considered for reinstatement, or proper legal action will proceed accordingly. Parents must be made aware of any digital communication between a worker and a minor. Best practice is just to include the parent in the communication group. This does not apply in case of an emergency or situation when the minor is in emergent danger. So, just so we understand this, what a simple best practice way of doing this, as it says up here, is for, if I'm going to text one of the teens, it's just to include the parent in the group text, so that way they know, all right, he's communicating with them and we're all on the same page. In fact, I have several different group chats with different teens where it's them and their parents, and we're just texting back and forth in that way. Either that, or I just text the parents if it's really that urgent for me to get to interact with them. The goal is not to just have daily, intimate conversations through our phones in such a way that would lead to more inappropriate and provocative things. Also, video calls from worker to minor require specific written permission from a parent. In order to video call, a third party, preferably a parent or guardian, should be present or in the video. One of the reasons for this is oftentimes the grooming process takes place, and then one of the things that someone who is trying to abuse a child will try to get them on a video call. And this is a simple way that we can safeguard from that within our policy. And in order to do this within our policy, there needs to be a third party present, preferably a parent or guardian, but sometimes it could be a fellow youth worker if the parents aren't available. You may say, Pastor Micah, why don't you just exclude this? Well, there could be a time where you're counseling a child, and the only way that they can meet, or a teen, the only way that they can meet is through a Zoom call. And so you have a 3-way Zoom call, and you get together and you just talk about what you need to talk about. That could be one way, but once again, this is not something that I would make a regular practice of doing anyway. The parents, you need permission from the parents anyway. Also, what about emergency and suicide or self-harm? Part of the reason in including this is you're building that relationship with the teenager or the child. And as you're building this relationship, they become more comfortable with you and they start sharing some personal information or ways that they are struggling in their life. We want to set forth a good way in which you could handle this from the church's perspective. What we mean by emergency is if you believe that a child is in an immediate danger, whether by another or to themselves, contact 911, then your department supervisor. Then, in a non-emergency situation, if you believe the child is having suicidal thoughts or thoughts of self-harm, contact your department supervisor immediately. This is not to say that we're not taking this very seriously. We do want to take it very seriously. That's why we're putting this in our document to begin with. But it's one thing for the child to be having thoughts, and it's another thing for them to be holding the thing that could kill them right now, and that would be considered an emergency situation. What do? You call 911, you tell them where they're at, the best way to get in contact with them, and the best thing, honestly, to do is to keep them on the phone and get them in contact with law enforcement. Then, at the end, if a department supervisor in a non-emergent situation believes the child to be at risk, he or she will contact the authorities with the advice of the pastors. Once again, it's just to take things seriously. We want to not toss this aside or just say, oh, they're being dramatic. This is somebody's life that we could have in our hands here. I want to conclude with this because this is the end of our policy manual. But ministering to children and teens is a privilege and not a right. We say this very regularly. No one deserves to work with children and teens or to minister to them. It's a privilege that we have, and it's a privilege that certainly can be taken away. So let's continue to treat it as a privilege. Now, any questions from going through this document? Yeah, Kim.
If someone missed this meeting, how can they, within the 30 days, make it up?
Yeah, so first things first, next week we will have a makeup session.
On the questions, can you repeat them in brief in case somebody
Yeah.
watches the video so they...
So how can you keep up to date on your training if you missed this time? Next week, we have a child protection makeup session in which this video will be played for them to be able to see and to understand. And then there also will be a link posted that you'll be able to. It'll actually take you to the website and you'll get a chance to watch the video and submit a form. Yeah, Terry.
I'm just wondering how you guys came to the conclusion that if we babysit a kid outside of church between another family, how it's the church's business. Like if Zach and Katie said, "Hey, can you watch our boys? We're going to dinner." I don't see why it's this business of the church for us to be able to do that because we're outside of church, nothing to do with it. And I understand we're representatives, but it just seems like it's kind of reaching.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand how that could be seen as reaching. And the whole goal was not to control what you are doing. And it's not asking for permission and saying, hey, I did this. It's not to say, and unless you're trying to keep something secret there that I don't know about, then, and I'm not saying that at all in our interaction here. I think you're understanding. But the goal is to say, hey, I did this. In fact, I'm going to do this. And you just take a screenshot, you send it to me, and you're like, hey, I'm doing this. And so then we know, all right, I do this on, either you do this on regular occasion or it's a one-time thing. I just babysat them this once. And so if then you come back and we find out, all right, in this other area, you abused a child. Not saying that has happened, but for instance, if it did happen, we could say, all right, he also had unfiltered access to Zach and Katie's boys, and he also had unfiltered access to these kids over here. So we can work with law enforcement in that way, as you are already an arm of the church that is ministering to these kids. Now, there are a couple of ways that I don't want to say around this. There are a couple of ways around this. The first one is you're not child protection approved and you can still care for church children. We don't need to know at that point. Or you are child protection approved and you're caring for non-church children. We don't need to know at that point. This is specifically if you're interacting with kids from this church as a non-approved worker and you are charged with their care. Yeah.
Let me add a few things. I know that feels like reaching, but a couple things to Pastor Mike's point. Number one, if we are aware of an abuse situation, we need to know who to notify. Now, if we're doing an investigation, we're not going to tell the whole church, hey, this person's under investigation. But if I know you have regular contact with other children and you're under investigation for child abuse, those people need to know. Because their child is going to be in your care. And if we were aware, we think this person may be an abuser, but we're going to, as long as this investigation takes, they're going to continue to have access. And another thing is, if you're a child protection approved worker at the church, whether you list it on your CV or not, people are going to see that as a sign of like trustworthiness, that the church is giving you a stamp of approval. Like, you are an approved worker at church, so like I know you from church, you work with kids at church, so I know you have a background check, I know you've been in an interview, so you must be a good person to watch my child. So you are going to be doing that child care with the church's stamp of approval, even though it's not meant to serve that way, it kind of does. So we need to know what children you're taking care of. You're using that as like a basis for which to take care of those children. Again, to Pastor Mike's point, it's not meant to be like we're just telling people who can watch whose kids. It's meant to be a layer of protection because we do have like this thing that naturally happens where, yeah, if I want somebody to watch my kids, it's going to be somebody from the church who takes care of kids at church.
Yeah, I guess I understand that, but I wouldn't let somebody watch my I didn't know. And not to say that like family and friends haven't had issues, we all know that goes around. I'm just, to me, if I'm watching somebody's kids, I'm not reporting it to the church. To me, it doesn't make sense to have to.
I want to clarify one more thing. This has always been our policy. Though that section is new, we have always had a statement in our child protection policy that said that if you were going to interact with the child outside, that you know from church, outside the church, you were meant to notify your department supervisor of that interaction. And people don't do it. And this was the specific area where we felt like it was being ignored. So this has always been the policy. It has always been the policy that if you were going to go and, because normally the way we apply it is, if I'm, like he mentioned you as an example,
Yeah.
if I'm gonna take such and such teenager out to lunch or whatever, you know, if you're gonna, you need to notify Pastor Micah and you need to have written permission from the parents. Why would that be different if you're doing childcare in their home?
Because
That's actually like a more, it's a more dangerous situation than the
I feel
situation where
like
we were already
if
applying
I'm
the
gonna
situation.
watch Logan and Katie's kids, because I feel like we're not technically family, but we kinda are. I shouldn't have to call Renee and say, hey, I'm watching Katie and Logan's kids because they were the nursery age. That would be weird if I had to contact Renee and say, hey, I'm just letting you know I'm watching. I feel like some people, I feel like the problem is, I feel like some people we're not technically family with, but we feel like we are. And when you're a church family, sometimes you get tighter than families.
I think that's the.
So that's, I think that's why I feel, it feels weird, because if it's just some random kid at church, it's one thing, but we're tighter than family sometimes.
Yeah, we're friends, so I mean, I think that's why it feels
That's
weird.
why it feels
Because,
intrusive, that's
Right.
all.
because we're already friends, it's like, it's just like a buddy doing a good job. you know?
Yeah, like,
So the
It's
problem
weird.
is, if I say, this is the right policy for certain situations, but it's not the right policy for other
No,
situations,
No,
I can't say, hey, you gotta determine for yourself if this is the type of situation where you need to report it. We just need to make this a standard, and you can, Pastor Micah's phone can be blown up with this. It doesn't have to be Renee, you can go directly to Pastor Micah. Hey, I just want you to know, I am babysitting for this other family in the church. They know me as a church worker. Okay? That is like that is the seal of approval that I'm operating under. And whether you think that or not, it is true, because you are a child protection approved worker at church. I really can't get into details, but I know of situations where it's like the church became aware of a problem and then found out later that that person, under the auspices of being a child protection approved worker, had access to all these kids in church outside of church that the church didn't know about. So this investigation's going on for months, and those families don't know that the person that is watching their kids is under investigation. And then the church is delinquent in its responsibility to take care of those children. Because again, if you're under investigation, I'm not gonna get up in the pulpit and say, hey, so-and-so is under investigation for child abuse. If you keep your kids away from them, but we need to know who to contact in the case of a report. And again, I know it's weird if you're friends with somebody in church and you end up having to send a text to Pastor Micah and say, hey, I'm watching so-and-so's kids, but I can't say, hey, determine for yourselves when it's appropriate to tell us. And again, this was already the policy. It's just a part of the policy that every time I've done child protection training, I've tried to tell people to do it, and they don't. And it's troublesome. If you are meeting with a child that you know from church, outside of church, and you're gonna be responsible for them, this has always been the case. You always needed to notify your department supervisor.
Can I just say that this really is just another layer of protection, even though I understand exactly what you're saying, because I think in the meeting, I had the same reaction. It was like, no. But a lot of abusers are people that were looked at as trustworthy, and they just can't believe that this person would have done that. So it really is that extra layer of protection for the kids and for the authorities and the pastors to go back and have that conversation that, you know, this and this could also be affected. And it really is just a text message, but I get it.
There are like 5 ways.
I do want to say that a simple way that you can do this is all it has to be is a one-time acknowledgement saying how often you do it. So if it's every week you babysit kids, you say, hey, I babysit such and such family every week. And you just send that text to me. And then you don't have to send it to me again. We just know that that's the case.
Yeah.
So it's not like every single time you have to text me. But if it's a normally occurring thing, you can just send me the text once and that takes place.
This could be today, like if right now you know that sometimes you watch Logan and Katie's Kids, you just text Pastor Micah and we have a written record. Sometimes I watch Logan and Katie's Kids so that if, heaven forbid, there were ever an allegation against you, we know who this affects and who needs to be aware of the investigation. We don't want to broadcast investigations, but we also want to protect children from getting affected. Kim,
This isn't asking permission to do this.
correct.
No.
This
It's
is
a
just
notice.
a notice.
You're saying, hey, I do this.
Notice. Yep, we will not tell you yes or no. That is not the point. We will just say thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Lee.
So this, I want to actually say two things. First off, is this regulation or policy that we have regarding this, okay, let me say this in parentheses first. I am ecstatic about our child protection policy. It's not like I'm against anything here. I'm thrilled that what we got going on here. So I want to put that out first. But regarding this, is this strictly for this requirement to report, is that just for people that are child protection approved, or is it for the general membership?
So we are not holding this as a requirement for general membership. So the issue is not that we want to police who watches each other's kids. The issue is that people who work with children at our church have this intrinsic, we watched, there was a lawyer who explained this, and he said it's implied responsibility. So it's like you have this stamp of approval that we've given you by putting you on this list of people who work with kids, that you work with kids. And so that's what we're trying to mitigate, is just like, okay, if you are operating under stamp of approval, we need to be able to intervene if necessary if there's a problem.
Right. Well, so my second thing is, so if you think about, this is kind of like a close analogy to, okay, think about the topic of gun control here in America. A common thing that people say is, when guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns. And an equal thing along with that is they want to regulate who registers as guns, thinking that that's going to prevent crime, and we know it doesn't, because the criminals don't report their guns. And I look at this as an exact analogy to that. Would we ever expect someone that's abusing kids to voluntarily tell you that they're, what I'm saying is we're asking everybody that doesn't do it to report it, but do we think that the people that were actually going to do that would report it? You know what I'm saying?
So-
So this is not going to be a stopgap against abuse. This is not going to prevent non-child protection approved people from committing abuse. This will not really even prevent child protection approved people from committing abuse. You need to be very choosy with who watches your children. That's on you as parents. We're just trying to do everything we can as a church to make sure we're not complicit in the abuse by giving this kind of like, you have this stamp of approval. We don't know whose kids you're watching. We don't know how you're interacting with them outside the church. We don't know if you are regularly going and picking up this kid and taking them to the park and being alone with them all the time. We have no idea what's going on. And then an allegation of abuse comes up and we don't know who to notify. Those parents never know.
I guess my only thought on that was, I wouldn't expect the person who's actually doing those kinds of things to actually ever report.
Well, here's the issue. Here's the issue, and this is a fact for all of our child protection approval stuff. If you don't follow the policy, it's up on the screen. Ministering to children is a privilege, not a right. We have the ability to say, sorry, you can't work with kids. You didn't follow the policy. Now let me talk for a minute about Pastor Micah. Yeah. I need to talk to you about safety, but that'll have to be another week. Let's talk about evacuation stuff. What happens if I find myself in a situation where I am in breach of our child protection policy? What should I do? And this happens, okay? So, you guys are all craning your necks, so I'll walk up there. Okay, so in this particular situation we're talking about, I'm watching so-and-so's kids. My phone is dead. I should have texted Pastor Micah about this ahead of time, and I forgot. Or probably the most common situation that happens is some way, somehow, I ended up responsible for a child at church, and I'm the only one here. Okay? So sometimes that's a miscommunication with your other leader. Like, the kid, this has happened to me. Kid is in the bathroom. I think everybody's gone home. My other leader goes home. It's just me. Kid comes out of the bathroom. Your parents aren't here yet? No, they said they're 10 minutes away. Okay. Well, I'm going to do everything I can to fix that problem as soon as possible. I'm going to call my leader. Hey, you have to come back to church. You know, such and so kid is still here. And then I'm going to do whatever I can to be above board. I'm going to sit outside, which in the one case is what I did. I sat outside on the sidewalk with that child in view of the road, and we waited for the leader to come back. But what happens, what should I do if that happens? Or like I end up in a situation where I'm in breach of child protection, especially the supervision or reporting or whatever, and what do I do? I would encourage you, in fact, I would require you, to fill out an incident report form. Okay, we have a form called an incident report form. It is for anything that happens that is unusual that you think we should take note of. We use these almost exclusively right now for injuries. Okay, so if you've ever filled out an incident report form, it was probably for an injury. You know, so-and-so hit his head, there's a bruise, here's what happened, you know, this kid pushed him or whatever. And so we know where that bruise came from, and we have a record of it. This incident report form you can use for if there is an issue in child protection, and you should. So in the situation where I accidentally ended up being the sole supervision, and I frantically try to fix that problem as soon as possible, the best way I know how, but I need to make a record. I need to say, this kid was in the bathroom, we thought all the kids had gone home, I sent my fellow supervision home. As soon as I found out about the situation, we sat out on the front porch, I called my fellow supervision, they came back, we waited for their parents. You put that all in writing, and there's two reasons why. One, if this were to ever go to court of law about your interactions with that child alone, the person who took notes wins, okay, so defend yourself. Number two, I will see that incident report. Every time there's an incident report form filed, a copy of it ends up on my desk. And that's important because if I notice a pattern, I can address it. I'm not going to say you can't work with kids anymore because this one time you ended up, you know, in a situation you shouldn't have, but you reported it to me and we all know what happened, and you know, we could review it on the cameras or whatever we needed to do to make sure everything was above board. And it's all signed off. I'm not going to say, well, you made one mistake. I just told you I made one similar mistake. And now you can't work with kids. But if I notice a pattern, so if I notice a pattern of you breaking the child protection policy, you won't be able to work with kids anymore. If I notice a pattern of you failing to report those types of failures. So you say, well, if I'm prone to making this mistake, a supervision mistake, I just won't report it. I'm going to take that as more serious. You had an aberration from our normal procedure and you didn't tell me. You didn't file an incident report. You didn't tell your department supervisor that this thing happened. That's more concerning in my mind than you making some kind of a mistake with, like, again, like sending your supervision home, or you got here early and the kids' parents dropped them off like 50 feet away and you couldn't say, parents, you have to stay until the second adult comes, and they just were gone, which has also happened. So make sure if there is a breach of child protection policy, you report it, you let us know, and make sure that when you are in that breach, when you're dealing with it, you act very reasonably, and note your actions in your report. Like I said, we didn't have the right supervision. We sat on the porch, or we sat right in front of this camera the whole time, and it's something that can be checked on, and we did everything we could to rectify the situation as soon as possible. Does that bring up any questions at all about what I expect you to do if there's a breach of child protection policy? Yes? Okay.
the very first time we ever submitted a child protection policy with our insurance company, which was when authors of that original policy, 2001 maybe? Wait, like a long time ago. This was in the policy. I feel like I need to keep saying this. It has always been the policy that if you are meeting with a child you know from church, outside of church, alone, you needed to report that to your department supervisor. And for some reason in our minds, we decided, well, if I'm babysitting them, which is like the closest form of access you could possibly have to that child, it is much more close access than taking a child to lunch or to the park or whatever. If you're babysitting them in a house, we decided, well, that one doesn't count. So we've come back and we've specified that's actually like the main one. That's the main thing we need to know. You have access to a child alone in their home. And again, it could be a one-time thing, and it could be as simple as, just so you know, I sometimes babysit this kid. Just tell us once in writing, just one time. But that way we know that connection in case of an issue, in case of a report of abuse, in case we remove your child protection approval. We need to notify those access points because they're probably operating under the understanding that you work with kids at church, so you're a safe person. Again, this is just a clarification of what was already the policy, and I feel like every year when I do the training and I say, we're not doing this, please do it, people don't start doing it, and we need to do it. So, again, and if they're related to you, this policy does not apply to you. So I watch my grandkids, I watch my niece and nephew, I watch a relative of mine. Again, this does not apply to you. And if they're not related to you, you just need to tell us one time. I sometimes watch this child. It's that simple. Okay, any questions? Yes, Tanya.
I'm going to take a little left field.
Okay.
I have a question, kind of goes off of what Renee said. You have members, non-members, both could be guilty of anything. So why do the non-members have to fill out a form every year versus everybody? Because to me, member, non-member doesn't make it any more special. It can happen on both ends. That's no different than a CPL holder. You need to take a renewal every 5 years. I'm completely against that because in a year, something can happen. Our store started that, where someone had a CPL, and we found out after it got approved, they started talking, and we realized, uh-oh, we taught them to let's take them back. I look at that the same thing as a member to a non-member not filling out a form. Why would not everybody do it?
Yeah, good question. For a non-member to be working with children, we consider to be an extremely exceptional situation. So we have taken steps to make sure that this is considered an extremely exceptional situation. And if somebody is working with kids as a non-member, there's probably a reason. And we would hope that that reason would be temporary, that eventually they would come to a place where they would be able to become a member of the church. And we need to know if that reason is the same from year to year. And we want to remind people who are working with kids as a non-member that this is an exceptional situation. It's very rare in our church for this to be the case, but it does happen. And so we're trying to keep it exceptional. We don't want this to be the norm.
It's not picking on the non-member, it's just, I guess I'm just trying to understand. It kind of makes sense, everybody fills it out here. I guess just my opinion.
So the normal process for working with children is you would be a member of the church, and then you would become child protection approved.
Just because you're a member doesn't,
Correct.
I know it is.
Bob, do you have something to add?
Just a question, how often are the background checks repeated even for members?
Everyone who has filled out a background check report form, our standard is to perform background checks annually. It's usually in the summer, but if we need to do it more often, we can. There's no limit on how often we can run a background check. And when you filled out your form to work with kids, you gave approval for that. Any other questions? I know changes are hard and changes are scary, and thank you for your patience with this. We are taking under advisement legal counsel. We are in communication with our insurance company. And we're also adapting to new best practices, okay? We would be remiss if we weren't doing everything we could to protect the children that God has given us charge over, and that's what we're trying to do. So we're looking to experts, we're looking to proven data, we're looking at things, churches, situations where things have gone wrong, and seeing where can we see the danger and hide ourselves, because that's what the wise man does. So that's why changes are necessary. I know it's weird because we haven't really changed our child protection policy in like 25 years. So it feels strange, but it needs to be updated. We need to do more. We need to be careful. We need to foresee the danger. Okay, if you have other questions or concerns, please feel free to come talk to me. You can come talk to Pastor Micah too. I kind of feel bad because I fielded him the child protection training on the change day, but he did a lot of work. But this is a group effort. The Child Protection Committee was all involved, and so I'm thankful for Pastor Micah doing a lot of legwork. I'm thankful for the committee doing the research necessary to make sure what needs to be done and doing all the clarifying. Again, if you have questions, concerns, let me know. I'd be happy to help you. If you want to know, hey, here's this particular situation I'm in, just ask. And what would it hurt you to ask? Like, I don't know if I need to report that I'm taking care of this kid. What will it hurt you to send that text just so that you're above board? I'm not sure if I should fill out an incident report form for this little weird thing that happened. Just fill it out. I mean, it'll take you a minute. Okay, so that'll be good. Okay, let me pray, and then we'll be dismissed. We have 2 minutes until we're supposed to start the morning service here. Father, thank you for the children and teens that you've given us in our church and the awesome responsibility that we have to disciple them and to bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Their parents, of course, are entrusted to do that, but the church in partnership with them and supporting the parents' work at home. Father, thank you also for the responsibility that I have as a shepherd to keep the wolves away from the lambs. Lord, help us to all take that to heart, that we would make sure that church is a place that kids can be safe, that we would be willing to give up some of our time, some of our liberty, some of our preferences in order to do what's best for the kids. And Lord, I'm thankful for the patience that people have had with these changes, especially people who've been working with kids here for decades under the same policies. Pray that you would help us to adapt well. I pray that we as the leadership who've drafted these changes would accept criticisms graciously, be willing to hear, and Father, that we would keep the same mission and the same goal in mind for your glory. Father, thank you for all the goodness that you've poured out on us today and the opportunity we have to fellowship with one another. Pray your blessing on the rest of the activities of this morning. Pray in Jesus' name.